Hello, fabulous listeners. Thanks for tuning in to Old Bodies Outside. This is your host, Dr. Brian Peterson. This episode's guest is Dr. Kara Alexzander, who is an Eastern medicine doctor, nutritionist, acupuncturist, and PMS specialist. She has been practicing alternative medicine and natural forms of healing since 1998. Her areas of specialization are endocrine, digestive discomfort, acute and chronic pain, fertility and pregnancy, body comfortability, emotional imbalances, and trauma. You can check out more about Dr. Alexzander at www.drkaraalexzander.com. Kara, it's a pleasure to have you on Old Bodies Outside.
Hi, Brian. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good to see you. And so I was thinking to get this conversation started, I just gave an introduction about you, but I felt like there's so much more that you do, so many services that you supply and whatnot. So I figured, why don't you kind of extend the introduction, tell the audience a little bit more about yourself.
Okay. So I'm super excited to speak with you today and to share the wisdom of Chinese medicine and various healing modalities and how an individual can help heal themselves simply by understanding what our symptoms mean, which we're often ignoring. So one way our body talks to us and communicates to us is through signs and symptoms. And with Western medicine, we've often been told to ignore these symptoms, but it's an early symptom of what might happen on a trajectory if we stay on it. So I've been obsessed with medicine since I was a little girl, actually. I used to eat food in large quantities and small quantities. I'd eat a whole box of crackers kind of just to see how it would affect my body, which is kind of ridiculous, and a little bit nerdy. But I was pre-med in college when I started at the University of Colorado at Boulder, but I switched out of it because I felt like there was a more comprehensive view than what we see through a microscope. We're constantly impacted physically, emotionally, mentally, and dietarily, and our body is responding every second. So Western medicine might look at things through a static way, but Eastern medicine helps us understand and identify what we're doing on an everyday basis and what we can do to help heal ourselves through our lifestyles, through being out in nature, through the food choices that we make. So it's a really interesting journey, and I've had all sorts of interesting symptoms and ailments myself, which have led me to be a better practitioner and helping people understand their bodies as well.
Yeah, I love that explanation of the static approach versus more of the fluid approach. People are constantly changing. It made me think of a philosophical thought experiment. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before, but it's called the Ship of Theseus, where it's a guy that has an old Greek boat sailing around the Mediterranean Sea, and his boat is comprised of all these wood panels. And if you were to change one wood panel at a time, eventually the whole boat gets changed via these wood panels being changed out. Is that boat still the same boat, or is it a different boat now? And so there's constantly just change going on with that boat. And so you got me thinking about that with kind of the approaches of looking at someone through more of like a longitudinal approach versus that static approach.
Have And then you have your childhood upbringing and where our brain is still developing at a very young age and how it affects what choices that we make. I certainly have seen through my own journey as I've transitioned out of corporate world and into more of the healing world. But I've also been through this whole transition with my body. So it's like I've gone through a more masculine energy, and then now I feel like a more feminine energy. And like you said, I feel like I'm almost on a different boat. It's like, what happened? But it's the healing journey that I've been on from my childhood experiences, whether good or bad, and the different types of things I've been drawn to either. I feel like our body really wants to heal. And so we're drawn to certain people to help heal, or we're drawn to certain foods to either exacerbate an issue or to actually help an issue. So there's lots of different ways to tackle different types of traumas and issues and pain in our body is by, we work out, or we work out too much, and then we have to go through healing because we've been working out too much. And now, like for me, I broke both my ankles because I was working out way too much, which put me on crutches for 7 months. And so I was sort of bedbound for 7 months. And in that 7 months, I had to deal with some traumas that had happened in my childhood. And now it changed my trajectory, where it was sort of this crazy runner to had me stop and be static and look at what pains or issues that I needed to address. And then now I no longer needed to run all the time. So it's kind of interesting how our journey will change throughout life based on what our childhood experiences are. and we'll be drawn to certain things because of it.
Yeah. And so what did you mean by the masculine energy and the feminine energy?
So masculine energy is more like you're doing, you're an action based, right? And then feminine energy is more nurturing based. So how do I become from a more caring, loving situation or more healing versus doing and being more cerebral about things. So it's more about the feminine's more about how do I feel about something in my body versus masculine, how do I think my way through something. So it's a different way of tackling something. And then masculine energy is more like body wise, like, people that have a six pack or they're running all the time, or they need to be A type, or they need to be constantly moving is more masculine, where feminine is more like, how do I gather? How do I nurture and stay more sedentary? So it really depends on, really, it's perfect to have the balance of both of them together.
Yeah, I was going to ask if in Eastern medicine approaches, does it look to balance those two energies?
Absolutely. It's all about balance. So for someone that's living their life constantly one way, they eventually get out of balance because they've been doing one way for a long time. So they have to stop what they're doing and do the opposite to bring it back in balance. So just like in seasons where winter is about more consolidating and staying calm and eating heavier foods, where when it comes springtime, things grow faster, lighter, lots of movement, is it's supposed to fluctuate with the seasons, with ourselves. We can't stay on a certain thing for too long. Otherwise, we start to see problems because we're repeating the same pattern over and over and again.
Mm-hmm. So why don't we use that to kind of segue into some of the similarities and differences since we brought up Eastern medicine here, what are some of the similarities and differences between Eastern medicine approaches and Western medicine approaches?
Well, Western medicine is really interesting. It's I went into school a little bit more jaded about Western medicine because I was 30 years old and I was watching. My dad had gotten very ill at the time. Actually, he'd had a couple of strokes, and we realized he needed more care, and so we walked him into a facility as a somewhat strong and virile guy. But then about a year and a half later, he's passing away from a massive brain bleed. And in that time that Western medicine was taking care of him, they had put him on more and more medications. So in 6 months after being in this facility, he was bedbound, right? So their solution was more medication versus looking at something like, how do we help this person heal and get better versus mask the problem? But Western medicine's amazing for acute problems. You break an arm, incredible to go in and get, a cast, or you're having kidney failure, you need to go on dialysis. But for everyday problems and everyday solutions, it's Eastern medicine. So I followed this pediatrician during when I was finishing my doctorate, and he said that 10% of his patients were patients he needed to worry about, and the 90% were psychosomatic issues. 90%. And there was nothing that he could really do about it, but the 10% he needed to rule out the bigger problems. But those people were still going in for problems, right? So they still had like body pain or shoulder pain or dry eyes or dry mouth or whatever it was. But he was basically saying it was psychosomatic. And it's like, yeah, but they're still experiencing problems. So Eastern medicine looks at it like, do you have a smaller problem? And then it gets bigger unless you address it. It's sort of like a fire. Like if you have a fire that starts small, it gets bigger. And anything with pain or problems, when you don't address them, they get bigger. So Western medicine will more address it when you're in the red flag zone and the problem's gotten too big, where Eastern medicine addresses everyday solutions, everyday problems, where people might just like, oh yeah, I'm some unicorn and I have some sort of rash and that's just who I am. No, it's what you're contributing to it, what you're eating, what you're doing, what your lifestyle is like, what you're emotionally feeling, what you're mentally doing. So that's where they differ.
So I have a fire inside of me that's gotten out of control, and that's insomnia. Like, how do I peel it back? Do you do any work with people that have been having prolonged insomnia?
Absolutely. I had actually insomnia for about 10 years pretty badly. So I had a hard time falling asleep. I had a hard time staying asleep. And then I would wake up about 4 a.m. in the morning. So Brian, this was when I was exercising a ton and going to school and under mass amounts of stress and drinking a bunch of coffee and eating a lot of salsa. So that's a fire, right? So it's like you're asking, it's almost like your body is built like a car. So if you drive it into Death Valley in the middle of the desert and you're asking it to keep going and going and going without putting oil in it, without putting the fluids in it, all of a sudden you're going to get this like deficiency fire, right? Or you can get something where someone might be eating like a bunch of steak and they're drinking a bunch and they're like living this excess lifestyle. Well, then they have like this excess fire going on. So for someone like you that loves to run, right? And you might love a beer or you might love spicy food and you may not be nourishing your body enough. All of a sudden you have this fire. So at night we're supposed to be able to relax, but we have this internal fire going on and our body can't relax. So if you have enough fluids, blood and fluids, then your body can root and relax and go to bed. Unless, there's other things going on. You might have a ton of stress, and depends what time you wake up too. So if you wake up in the middle of the night between like around 3 o'clock, then it relates to how the liver and lung function. So those two organs intimately connect and communicate constantly. So if you have a lot of lung heat or you'll have a lot of liver heat, then you're going to wake up during that time because you're having insomnia. Or, some people just can't get to bed at like 11 o'clock, and it has a lot to do with like how their gallbladder is functioning. So it really depends on what's going on and how someone's eating and what they're thinking about.
Interesting. Yeah. So I have a hard time falling asleep, and I wake up about 5 or 5:30 every day, but I have a hard time falling asleep before 11. And I feel exhausted, but I do feel like I have a lot of stress inside of my chest. I feel like I just have stress from a job and whatnot. And then also the coffee component that you brought up, I thought was really interesting. I drink a lot of coffee Monday through Friday. I stop drinking it Saturday and Sunday. Monday, I start drinking again, and Monday nights are typically when I have my worst insomnia.
There you go. People usually know their problem right there.
No, I guess
problem solved.
The question is, do we actually just stay ignorant towards it and just turn our head to it? That's what I do.
That's all personal choice, right? It's like whether someone wants to address their problem. But if they have a small problem, remember, problems get bigger. So
Right.
if you taking the time off and giving yourself a break is absolutely what you need. It's sort of like being in a relationship where you're constantly fighting. And then if you don't take breaks from that, you're constantly in stress. So The same thing of what you're putting in your body. If you're constantly stressing out your body, well, you got to take breaks. It's okay to take breaks.
Yeah, no, and I picked up that insomnia going through grad school and I was getting my PhD, and it's something that has stuck around with now being a professor and whatnot, and it's pretty can beat me up pretty bad sometimes just because, so there's this give and take with it where it's like I can't fall asleep at night, so then I want more coffee the next day.
Right. Yeah. So then you're that deficiency car that's going through Death Valley, right? But one thing a professor told me, she was like, Kara, if you can just get to bed before 10 p.m., it actually is a better time to be able to fall asleep, because after 10 p.m., then your gallbladder, as they call it in Eastern medicine, starts the planning. We start planning and think about what we want, and then all of a sudden it activates the mind, and then, we're up for a while planning our life. So if you can shut down that planning before and go to bed before 10 p.m., you're going to have a better chance of falling asleep.
Yeah. Okay, well, enough about my insomnia. I wanted to hear about some of the just the way that people go through their life and the journey that people have in their life, and how that's really important, probably in Eastern medicine, because everyone does have a very unique trajectory in life.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I've really gotten into, is kind of understanding what happens in brain functioning. I'm going to find my little notes here on this just because I think it's so interesting.
Yeah, take your time, find those notes. We were exchanging emails, and one of the things that you mentioned was that it's impossible to go through life without micro and macro traumas, and I had never thought about that. That was something I thought was a really cool note that you put in the email.
Well, think about any big life decisions, how it affects your life. If you go through divorce, if you have a massive car accident, if you've lost somebody, and then how it alters what your journey might be and what your personal decisions might be because of that, or forced to be because of that. like sometimes, and I truly think there's some element about our body constantly wanting to heal, because if we're not ready for that healing, the problem gets louder and the body forces us to stop and go through some healing period. So, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it exists or if it's true, but it's interesting how we remain on this path. We've got all the signs and symptoms. We don't stop and do anything. And it's like, bam, something big happens and it has us stop and shift what we're doing and change trajectory and be like, this is actually the better trajectory that I needed to be on. But it needed to be loud sometimes. Sometimes it's quiet and sometimes it's louder, but it honestly changes our journey and trajectory. And it's fascinating to watch. And especially like even people's food choices, like we're drawn, what I've seen a lot of my patients. So some who's grown up in an environment where it might be an abusive environment. They had an abusive father. They tend to be attracted towards foods that cause more of an inflammation within the body. And there's lots of research and studies that have been done that our cells remember what happened. And so they're attracted to things to perpetuate what happened because that's what they feel comfortable in. They feel like comfortable in a space where there's lots of anger or inflammation, and now we're automatically eating foods that perpetuate that as well. So some people that want to go through healing, I mean, big in Western culture is talk therapy, but some people don't want to do talk therapy, especially men. They're just like, I don't want to talk about it. Right. So there's multiple ways of addressing that healing, which is one can change their diet and it automatically goes to a more alkaline situation. They feel cooler and calmer and it's allowing the body to heal. And then that trajectory might change where they're, I need to go hiking more. I need to be outside more. I need to be in environments where it calms my heart versus something that's inflammatory and constantly causing this aggravated sense and stress going on. So yeah, it's interesting to watch. And, and learning through a lot of research is that our brain development it's often before the age of 12. I mean, we have different brain waves that are forming and our subconscious is forming first. So all those things that we learn about, like, are we lovable? Are we creative? Are we stupid? Or whatever it is that we're learning before the age of 12. And then we're making adult decisions based on that, about what we want to eat and what life choices that we make. And it's really, really hard to get out of those childhood, brain decisions, or I guess during that brain development, and how to get past that.
So is it important as a parent to kind of mark behaviors that you see would help them be successful as an adult? So say your child expresses empathy at 9 years old towards, a kid at school that's being bullied, and they show empathy towards that person that's being bullied, and marking that behavior, saying, oh, that's so great that you showed empathy towards that person. Would that help it carry on into adulthood? And hopefully that person would have a higher sense of empathy as an adult?
Well, I mean, you look, is it nature versus nurture? Do they come into the world with an empathetic type of viewpoint, or is it something they learn from their parents and now that's where they're learning to be an empathetic person and make their mark in the world, but it may not be actually what they need. So it means certainly the opposite of, like, I don't know, doing bad behavior and we're like, I don't know what bad behavior might look like, but someone who's empathetic is more accepted into our culture versus someone, look at ADHD and ADD. It's massively on the rise,
Right.
and then where all these kids are going on prescription pills. And it's like, why are we tempering this creativity? Why are we tempering this like excitement about life, right? Where you look at the masculine energy and it's like, they think about things more linearly, where women or feminine girls, they can have a diffuse awareness. So they're able to connect with the people around us or around themselves, and like they have because of that much more calming nature, where boys are testosterone, they come into the world with all the testosterone they're going to have, so they're like massively amped up, and we want to amp them down for some reason. I'm not sure why we do that, because I think it's sort of dampening our creativity and dampening what their purpose is as a man or as a woman or as our creativity, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I wonder, just the long term, how that's going to turn out with as children become adults. ADHD and ADD is on the rise. What will that be like in 30 years when they have all become adults and they were medicated as kids for that? And I agree. Like, there's so many outlets that could be used positively instead of medication.
Yeah, I mean, and depression, like the rise of prescriptions for depression. I had a girlfriend that they put her on an antidepressant when she was 15 years old. In fact, my doctor wanted to put me on an antidepressant as well when I was 15 for stomach pain. He's like, let's put you on an antidepressant.
Huh.
Well, it's pretty difficult to get off of those antidepressants. People stay on them and they try and get off and they really struggle getting off of it because it changed the brain chemistry. And why are we trying to numb out what emotions we might be experiencing, which would be part of our healing journey, going back to the healing journey? It's like if we're going through pain that we need an antidepressant, what about just addressing what that pain might be? Is it something that we're eating, or do we need to eat a gluten-free diet, right? Do we need to have some talk therapy? I read some study about how kids do better with outdoor activities and how it's more calming to them, especially kids with ADHD and ADD. Like why are we not addressing this? Instead we want to numb everybody out, and it's a strange phenomenon that I'm seeing, that I see with Western medicine and in our culture too.
Yeah, I wonder if that will, just kind of saying what I was saying earlier, but will that produce more numbing as adults through alcohol or drug use?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and then people don't know the signs and symptoms to look for with their body and how to heal themselves. And they get so disconnected from their body about what things mean, and they're so uncomfortable with emotions. It's like, you're not supposed to feel emotions, or I don't know how to look at
Ah,
this,
right.
right? And I'm supposed to be and as humans, like we want to connect all the time. It's like our innate need is to connect with other humans, yet as individuals we almost feel disconnected constantly from ourselves and from other people. So it's amazing to watch some of my patients come in, most of them, and out in the world they're one person, and when they come into my room behind closed doors, they're like, I've never told anyone this, I've never talked about this in my life. A lot of tears. And that's part of that healing. Before I even do any sort of acupuncture, I'm like, wow, just to unload that is incredible, of how people are holding on to that kind of energy. So yeah, it's we have our one person out here and our one person inside too.
Yeah, yeah. And so do you think that a lot of it has to do with just the numbing of emotions, the suppressing of emotions versus learning how to manage them?
I think so. I think so. Yeah, and we want some one fix all diet plan, one fix all prescription pill. We want to have, doctors look at pain where they're more giving us pain pills versus, I mean, I don't know about you and your doctors, but certainly if I go into a problem, they don't address how I got there and how I can get out of it. What they do is they give a prescription that goes, here you go, here's for your pain, but then you go home and you eat the exact same way. You're in the exact same relationship, you're doing the exact same exercise, and then now that pain and problem gets worse, it gets louder, whatever it might be.
Yeah, recently, and my mom suffered a minor heart attack a couple summers ago, actually, a summer of 2020. And she recently changed doctors because she had a doctor where she would show up and a doctor would be in there for like 2 minutes with her, say, hey, take these pills, and then leave it on to the next patient. And she's like, what? Like there's the whole me here. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's like, how do you work with that? So, I mean, that's what's great about Eastern medicine. It gives all sorts of tools and how to work with those different pains and problems. It's like, okay, there's actually solutions versus a band aid. So, it's not discounting Western medicine, but there are solutions out there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's hear some more about the services you offer. You mentioned acupuncture earlier. You've talked a lot about diet. There's one thing in diet that I did want to hear about more. It was an alkaline diet. I had not heard about that before. But let's hear about some more of the services you do, acupuncture and what else.
So I work with a lot of people's diet inevitably. I mean, most of the people that come in, usually it's for an orthopedic issue. I've got a shoulder pain or my ankle hurts. And then as we tap into it, we get to see like where there's certain sort of stagnation in the body from different traumas that have happened, like, emotional trauma or some sort of dietary trauma or some sort of physical trauma. And with that, there's usually some sort of emotional release too. So it's almost like peeling back the layers of healing. And ultimately, people usually change kind of what their outlook is on life and what they might want to create. Now, they might just want to come in for shoulder pain. They come in, they get out, but it ends up unfolding different things. And so we tackle it in multiple ways. We look at what the diet is, how someone's doing emotionally, and then we use acupuncture needles to help release some of that stagnation and get the movement flowing in the body.
And how do you assess someone's kind of emotional state?
Well, there are different emotions that I mean, we're experiencing different emotions all the time, right? But they're predominant or dominant emotion that people are experiencing mostly based on like what their lifestyle might be or how they're eating or what they've been experiencing in life. So if someone has an excessive amount of depression, they usually have a diet that might be heavy in like carbs or dairy or sugar. And because those foods are so heavy in nature, they're actually feeling heavy emotionally as well. Or someone that like where you're on fire, you've got all these ideas and you've got a flame going on, right? You're very active and thinking about things. So it's like how that affects our emotions on that level as well. So it really depends on what someone internally has going on and what outward emotions get expressed or felt.
So there's a strong connection between your diet and your emotions.
Oh, so big. Yeah, so big.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so going back to that alkaline diet, what is that and how does that affect your emotions?
Well, you have some people that are vegan, right? And they're like, oh, I'm healthy. I'm eating the most like vegan, healthy diet, all these greens, salads, juicing, and yet they're detoxifying all the time. And you have to look at it and be like, why do you need to get a scrub brush out and clean your insides constantly? What are you cleaning out? What emotionally is going on for you that you need to clean it constantly? So that's more of the alkaline diet, right? And so people get hooked on that because Western culture is like, this is the best for you, but not really for people. I was the most sick when I was vegan. I've had 9 broken bones in my life. Most of them happened during that time that I was vegan. I was anemic. I was deficient. I had dry skin. I had pale face, dry lips. It's just like, and I had this swollen tongue because I wasn't able to process fluids right. And I wasn't able to build blood well enough. So I was actually having hallucinations slightly. I get these weird hives. And it's just, I mean, here I was, thought I was being healthy and I was the most sick. And most people that come into acupuncture usually are on that alkaline side when they need to be eating more nutritive foods like beef, which people are so afraid to eat, but eating some grass-fed beef or eating some fish, eating some really good dense protein to help offset all that cleaning and scrubbing. So you want to have that balance in between both of those. So men sometimes, and I'm just saying more men might do this, but it's like they're eating like heavier, more inflammatory foods. They want to go back into like more detoxifying alkaline foods like green foods. So, and then where vegans want to go the opposite way and kind of get in the middle.
Yeah, so it seems like with a lot of this stuff, it's finding that balance. A lot of your approaches is finding that balance, whether it's diet, or your emotions, or looking at your past traumas and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like the alkaline person often experiences anxiety, and then the inflammatory person experiences anger. So then you have the emotion corresponding with it. So then you want to bring back and like help clean the body, help clean out that anger, where the anxiety person needs the nutritive properties to root the body so it doesn't have that anxiety feeling.
So when you start working with a new patient, how do you holistically come to understand their lifestyle and their habits so that you can help them achieve this balance?
I have them fill out paperwork that just gives me their signs and symptoms. So it can be anything from dry eyes, dry skin. They have excess phlegm. They might have a sunken in body. They might have different types of ailments that show up. We call this the 50-year-old shoulder, right? We have different knee pains that are like, I'm not moving forward in life. Literally, people have problems moving forward emotionally too. And they're usually eating things that affect the digestive system that make it feel heavy. So it's like I look at all these different signs and symptoms through my paperwork and find out what is causing this person issues. Now, I can't answer why someone might be wanting to feel heavy and having a difficult time working through things, but I'm like, based on your signs and symptoms, you're having a tough time moving through something. You have a tough time moving forward through something, and you're not processing something that happened to your life or that is happening right now. And now it's causing knee pain or issues that you just aren't wanting to work through. And usually people are like, oh my God, I am, and it's just because it's showing up in their signs and symptoms. So I address that and then address at different angles. What happened to you emotionally? What's going on mentally? What's going on physically? And what are you eating? So all 4 of those ways of looking at the body.
So do you address talk therapy yourself, or do you refer them to someone if they really need to dig into some sort of psychological factor that's going on?
Well, I'm not a psychologist, but certainly Eastern medicine looks at things like emotions, how it's pertaining to a specific organ system. So I'll talk about that and how it relates emotionally. But as far as working through problems, not really, but people will ultimately talk about what's going on.
Well, and it's such a strong connection between body and mind. I mean, it's such a strong connection.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. So this is really wonderful. And so I also want to hear about what are the major contributors towards just bodily ailments that you see.
The major contributors, stress. I'd say stress is the number one thing that causes problems, and it shows up anywhere in the body. It's the silent killer, and whether or not people want to address their stress or not is really up to them. But most people are going through a significant amount of stress. They're in the sympathetic system constantly, and then the cortisol is firing, and it's just stressing out the body. And the more you stress out the body, the more it taxes the body. The older it gets, the faster it ages, right? So it's really stress and understanding where that stress is.
How do you help someone like, they've been just living with this stress for a long time. They've been living with insomnia for a long time. How do you help them overcome like kind of this, like for me, like there's a bit of like an inherent stubbornness to address it.
Well, I mean, that's the biggest thing. Like, are you ready to move on? Like, are you ready to start your healing journey? And then it's getting back in balance. Like, some people, I'll take out coffee out of their diet. And I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's like having to get in front of like a freight train. It's like, it's okay. Like, just take a break from it. But people get so attached to what their patterns are that they don't want to, because it's their crutch. Like, coffee is people's crutch. Going and running can be someone's crutch. And it's the way that they're holding on to something instead of addressing what's causing problems. Because if they stop, oh my God, new stuff comes up, right? And they have to look at that. That's like when I broke both my ankles and I was bedbound and on crutches for 7 months. I couldn't run. Running was my way of dealing with my stress. And because I wasn't addressing the stress, then it surfaced what the stress actually was. So
Yeah.
it's more just it's hitting the brakes a little bit and finding out why we're addicted to certain things.
Yeah, and I think for me, like I just get worried of, okay, like yeah, there's this comfortability and this discomfort, I guess you could say, but I get worried that I'm not going to be able to perform and function as much the next day or the following day, and it's almost like I need like just a break from some of the challenges that go on daily with the work-life balance.
Well, we've been in school forever too, Brian. So, I mean,
So true.
it's hard to shut it down, right? And so it's like taking a break. It's finding a way to take a break from our mind and what we need to accomplish. I mean, how many different degrees or different books that we need to read to stack on more data, instead of going, I've got enough going on. I'm good right where I am. I don't need to be over here. I need to be right here and being at peace with that. And it's hard.
Yeah, I struggle with that. I really do struggle with that. I think that I'm always looking to the next step, always looking to the future. Like, what can I be doing? What can I do better? And there's like this self-assessment constantly going on instead of just being tranquil and at peace with myself of where I'm at that moment.
Right. And then you have to look at your childhood and be like, where did that show up at that early age? And then go back and be like, okay, I'm going to sit with that 3-year-old or whatever it is, or whatever age or whatever that might be, and be like, I'm enough. And which is, it's really a rudimentary thing. And we almost we don't want to say out loud what that might be. Like, oh, I learned that I wasn't lovable when I was 8, when my dad left. Like, I don't want to say that out loud, but that's what I thought when I was 8 years old, because my brain wasn't developed enough to understand actually what was happening. I put it on a really rudimentary level, and I just believed I wasn't lovable. And that's so sad. It's like, clearly I'm lovable, clearly like you're lovable or whatever. We're enough, but we have to heal ourselves in feeling that and feeling the pain and discomfort of, and acknowledge what we experienced during that time and then move beyond it.
Yeah, and how do you go about identifying some of those childhood experiences? You honestly just helped me identify a childhood experience, but
Oh, good.
and I'm happy to share about it. And it's something that is just it's generational trauma almost that has gone on in my family. And my mom, when she was 13 years old, her father passed away, and at that point, her mother stopped mothering. And so my mom was just isolated at home. She no longer had a dad. She had a checked out mom. And that was how her mom dealt with the trauma of her husband passing away. But my mom at that time had to start taking care of herself. She no longer had time for social interactions. She didn't have time for a lot of stuff. She was actually taking care of her mom at that point going forward. And my mom was not, didn't really get to talk with people of how's the best way to go forward. And so she adopted, to overcome the situations, a high level of perfectionism. And that was her survival mechanism. And it was something that was needed to be done. And she is a wonderful thinker. She's very organized. She is really fantastic at everything she does. And it's probably, rooted in that experience. But that's something that also I feel like I've also adopted. And I look back as a child, and I think I did adopt some of those behaviors for better or worse. I mean, there's nobody's fault in it. That's the example that's set forth. And I think that's how it goes with all of us. But I've also brought perfectionism into how I work professionally. And it could be that perfectionism that gets me thinking about the next day, the tasks I got to do, and my mind going crazy at nighttime. And now I have insomnia, long-term insomnia going. Not that it's all rooted in that situation. But as you were talking about those childhood experiences and how we adopt some of that stuff and then it continues on as an adult, it got me thinking about that.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, what they say, the emotions that go with when we look forward and we're not in today, then it causes anxiety and over hyperactivity of the brain. Like we're in survival mode in today when we haven't even gotten to tomorrow, right? And so we're worried about tomorrow so much. And then are the people that worried about the past and they're depressed, so that's the emotion that goes with that. Yeah, I mean, it's addressing that and looking at why do I have this experience and what can I do to help heal it? And there's all different types of thing. I mean, you can do ayahuasca, right? A lot of that's like a big, thing that's going on right now and how to heal it. And I think it's important to understand what healing modality works for each individual. Like I said, some people aren't into talk therapy, but you might be into breath work and understanding where that pain might show up in the body, or some people are into yoga. Whatever works for someone's healing, it's important to look at why something is going on and how to get through it. So where breath work wasn't as great for me for a long time, but now I love it, so I'm not sure why I didn't love it before, but it was so uncomfortable for me to get in the space. I'm like, I hate this. Yet it was touted as being incredible. I'm like, I don't understand it. And so it wasn't right for me at that time, and now it feels right to kind of address certain things. So it really depends on what part of the journey that one might be on and what type of healing modality might work for them.
Yeah, I think that's something that that was a great underscore right there. Is, it depends on where you're at in your journey, your life trajectory. Different things are going to work at different times.
Yeah. And some people might be pushing something really hard, like, no, you got to work on this. And you're like, I'm just want to scratch the surface just a little bit to get into it. And that's really important to understand that and recognize that and be like, that's all I want to do right now. And that in itself is healing. When people sign up for retreats, I'm like, congratulations, just signing up, that's healing. For people walking in the door to get acupuncture, I'm like, congratulations, you're healing, right? For someone just letting something out of the mouth like you just did, like happened to you when you're a child, that's healing. And to acknowledge that and be like, okay, I'm on that path. And I think we're on that path all the time.
Yeah. Well, speaking of healing, how does nature play into that? I know that I was looking over your Dr. Kara Alexzander Instagram profile, and it looks like you've been doing a lot of hiking recently.
Well, I'll tell you, Brian, actually, so I started doing conferences when I was in my 30s, and I was absolutely paranoid that my life would fall apart unless I was working. So if I went for a walk or hike or whatever it might be, I was paranoid that the rest of my life would fall apart. I was forgetting to bring in that joy. But one of the things that Eastern medicine taught me was that our body really heals in nature and our heart heals in nature. We're constantly on the go, where like I said, we're in our sympathetic system where our cortisol is firing, but we want to get into our parasympathetic where we're rest and digest and we're nurturing our system. And our bodies, like our heart is actually our empress of our body. And that's why cardiovascular disease is one of the number one killers, is because it's the last to be hit. And all the organ systems before that are affected before the heart is. So it's really important that we take care of our heart and we're not putting it under that stress. Because when we do that kind of stress, it causes our heart to get those palpitations, rapid movement. I mean, think about it. You're drinking coffee to try and keep up with it, right? We're putting our body through much stress. And even when we're running or working out too much, stress, stress, stress. So it's being in nature to actually do some sort of calming activity, be with the trees, be with the expansiveness, and sit with that nature is very healing to our bodies.
Yeah, I think
And
that's
yeah, I
what.
love it. And I
Yeah,
love hiking now. I don't feel like my life is falling apart. I feel like it's enhancing it.
yeah. If I were to start my work day at say 8 a.m. in the morning and take a break at 11 o'clock to go for a 30-minute run or something, I actually feel guilty. Feel guilty
Yeah.
about that, and it's like, wait up, like that's I deserve a 30-minute break in the middle of the day. Like, who doesn't, right? Like, I've been working constantly since 8 a.m., but I feel guilty. And I think, like, there's always emails going off, there's always things to be checking. And I have a hard time breaking away. Like, I typically eat breakfast and lunch at my computer every single day.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. You're not in the parasympathetic. And then that can cause problems. So it can cause digestive discomfort. It can cause heartburn, cause gas. It can cause different weight gain on the body. Because just because you're firing cortisol at that time. So you really want to rest and digest and nourish the body. Sounds like you
Yeah.
need a lot of love and hugs, Brian.
I'll take them. I'll take them. You got me thinking about acid reflux is another thing that I have battled. It's recently gotten better actually, but it was I think it like I hit the highest point of stress in my life during getting my PhD, and that was when I was suffering the worst from acid reflux. And it's since has calmed itself. There are some nights here and there where I need to take a Tums to fall asleep because I'm really feeling it, and laying down doesn't really help so much with it. There's some digestion that needs to happen or something, but it's gotten a lot better with that stress going down.
Yeah, that's good. I know. I get it. Yeah, when we're in times of stress, then our symptoms seem to be heightened. So like women who go with their PMS, which is why I love talking about PMS and women's cycles so much. Because in Western culture, we're sort of like, we don't talk about PMS, we don't talk about our cycles. And yet there are so many solutions that can be had for women to help them with their cycles. It's actually a gift, which men don't get. And we're like, because we look at it like, oh, we've got our period or we got our cycle. And we see it as such a negative when instead we could look at it and be like, oh, I have really bad digestive issues right before I start my cycle. That means I need to work on my digestion. Oh, I have a
Mm.
ton of rage right before I start my cycle. That means I'm not addressing what's making me angry, whether that's my diet or whether that's my husband or whatever it might be. Oh, I get terrible migraines that are happening or headaches right before I start my cycle. That means I'm not getting enough movement. And just like pressure builds. And then it's the top of the head, the same thing in the body. So the body acts just like nature might as well. And that pressure is building because they're not getting enough movement. So it needs more movement in their life and more exercise, and those headaches would go away. So I don't know how I went on that tangent, but that's one reason why I love just like learning women's health is because we've been given such a gift that men don't get into helping better towards ourselves and be on a better healing journey because of it.
Well, your awareness, you personally, your awareness is inspiring, and I think that awareness is something that could help everyone's health. And I guess maybe that's come from all your experiences and just practicing since 1998, and really getting into these Eastern approaches.
Oh, well, I mean, nothing will get you through something faster than learning how to get out of it if you want to get out of it, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes those are big things that happen. I've had so many different ailments. It's just wanting to learn and understand what my body's trying to say and then helping people understand their bodies too. And it's really important as far as if we want to feel better. Do we want to feel better? I think people want to feel better, but they don't know what to do. And Western medicine does not help us in this category at all. It's sort of like, that pediatrician that was like 90% of people that are in pain, he's turning away and being like, it's psychosomatic. And I'm like, but they have something that's wrong. They have something that's so wrong. They're actually going to the doctor to find out more about it. And yet they don't have any answers when they walk away. And especially women's health too. It's like our cycles it's like, here's the pill, but yet the pill is masking it And now it's causing bigger problems. One of the side effects of taking the pill is more cardiovascular and blood flow issues. There's lots of research and data about it because it's not helping the problem. It's masking one problem, and then you're doing the same things, and now those problems are showing up in different places. So it's like how to live a healthier lifestyle that actually we can feel good and be happy with where we're at versus in pain and discomfort through it.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to get back to the women's cycles. Is there any type of equivalent cycle that men go through that, maybe isn't as pronounced?
I don't know. I haven't done enough research on it because you definitely see men get emotional, but maybe because men don't get emotional on a normal day-to-day basis by the time they hit that pressure valve too. What I see with men is they seem more consistent, and then it sort of like comes out really loud, right? Because they're not expressing themselves. And men tend, which is beautiful about men, like they're able to like almost shut that off and like keep focused on what they're creating. But where was this learned? Why are emotions necessarily, I don't want to say bad to talk about, but men don't necessarily like to address their issues. I mean, certainly that's like my women that come in to see me, they're like, I've been trying to get my husband to come see you for like at least a year. And like his arm could be falling off, can't use it, totally numb. And they're like, I'm fine. It's just like a little tingling, whatever it is. But it takes like a deep amount of pain to get in and resolve stuff. And then to admit that there's some sort of pain or problem. So I think it's more of a pressure valve. That's my guess, where men just like stay consistent, don't address it. And then it just gets louder. So it becomes like a cycle as well.
Yeah.
And then, how much in nature too, you have the moon that has that gravitational pull. I mean, like it has enough pull that it's affecting waves and how waves are moving that. We're mostly water. So it has to affect us on a deep level. And we don't look at that much or talk about it, but
Not at all.
We're definitely in some sort of moon cycle, men and women.
Yeah. Because isn't a lot of women's cycles like it happens with the moon?
It can happen either or, right? So
Okay.
it's either right in the middle of the moon cycle or right when it's a full moon.
Oh,
And
okay.
women seem to tend to fall one or the other.
Yeah, I think you're like it makes conceptual sense to me that men have some sort of moon cycle in them too. And I like the way that you just put that. We are what are we, 90% water? I don't even know, but we're a lot of water.
We're a lot of water. Yeah.
We're a lot of water. So it makes sense that if the moon can pull, tidal fluctuations, it's going to have an effect on us internally too.
Yes, will you please report back? I want to know. I want to follow with the moon and see how your emotions do. See if your emotions are better or more heightened during the moon, the full moon versus the new moon. I'm so curious now.
Yeah, well, I was thinking we're going back to the nature component of our conversation. My favorite, more so than running, is to go backpacking because I get to slow down in nature. And I get to I have the time to stare, and I do it when I'm running, but I'm always like, I want to keep moving. I want to go running. But when I'm backpacking, there's time to go stare at stuff and fall asleep under the stars. And so what about doing the experiment when there's, a new moon cycle and then a full moon cycle, and seeing, maybe journaling when I'm out there and seeing what the differences are?
I would love that, especially because you tend to run more on fire. So where the water might be shifting in the body, and to see how those emotions might be changing with it. I'm so curious.
Yeah. Okay. So, gosh, we have covered a lot of stuff, and I wanted to kind of conclude talking about what types of supportive, I guess it's all based on the balance. So I was going to kind of hear about what types of supportive foods do you recommend, but I guess that's all dependent on what's going on with the person.
Right. That's the biggest message I can make. I mean, some people end up being on vitamins for 18 years. I'm like, why are you taking these? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, it really depends on what someone is going through, what their food choices, their vitamin choices are, their exercise choices. All of it should be dependent on what kind of symptoms they're experiencing to help be supportive to their bodies.
Yeah. Well, on that note, are there any other messages that you'd want to convey to the listeners of All Bodies Outside?
I think just being easy on oneself. I don't think that we do that enough in our culture. We're so hard on ourselves with so many different hammers and wanting to produce and wanting to take care of others. Or, I mean, it's just amazing how much stress people put themselves under. And for some reasons, like it's not even necessary. And it's just to be kinder and softer to ourselves and allow that loving, like love to enter our lives constantly. I feel like so many people push it out to protect themselves and instead of allow that to be and allow ourselves to be in a calming place. And it's almost stressful, it seems like, to be there. And so it's just put the hammers down.
Yeah. I think
And
that, go for it.
I was going to say is when we put the hammers down, we start to see, I read this quote, something like, anger or heightened emotions are the true self wanting to come out.
Oh.
So, and we often want to subdue that emotion that comes out, but instead it's listening to what that is. What is the body trying to say? What does the body want? And what am I not doing to be on my true path in life? And to listen to that instead of like beating up on ourselves and be like, I'm an angry person and I hate this and I hate you, and right? I mean, it's like, that's the hammer that we have inside going in our head, and to put it down and be like, where am I not living in integrity with who I am? And why am I not living with grace with that thought and idea that I actually can live it out, you know? So.
Yeah. And I think I do a better job providing grace for other people, being vulnerable with other people. But then when it comes to providing grace for myself, I'm like, oh, I could have done better. You could have done better. And it's like, hey, like, it's okay. Like, it doesn't really matter. And then like self grace and honestly self vulnerability. Like, I feel like those two things, like, I actually, now that we're having this conversation, is like things that I need to focus on.
Well, I think it's part of our survival mechanism too. I mean, we have 5 main emotions and 4 of them are considered negative. And I think it's just our survival, the way that we survive in our, I mean, we're not necessarily back in the olden golden days where we're living in nature, like running from a tiger, but it's a certain way that we keep ourselves forward focused and in survival mode and, you know, producing, is because we're living in somewhat of a fear or those negative emotions. So it's going, you know what, it's okay to be joyful. It's okay to love and to sit in that for a while. So, and know that we're not going to die, you know, so.
It actually sounds enjoyable.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, Kara, this has been a fantastic conversation. I loved how we just kind of went everywhere and addressed a lot of different topics. That was super fun. I learned a lot about myself. I had some epiphanies there during this episode. You know, Mom, I love you out there. I was not trying to say anything bad about you. I think that, you know, everyone can reflect on their childhood and look into different stuff and whatnot. And I have a very, very wonderful mother. She's fantastic and whatnot. I would not want to make her feel bad by any means. But I think it's okay to still examine, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's doing the best that they can. They really are. They're doing the best that they can with where they are in that moment. Whether they're angry, sad, depressed, whatever, they're doing the best that they can. If you're not, like, why are we not doing the best that we can? Like, what can we change or adjust? But everybody's, even then, people are just doing the best that they can, and to give grace to them too.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to kind of finish on, is everyone's doing the best they can. So let's give them grace. And I think that's something that is just wonderful.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks,
Kara,
Brian.
thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. But I owe you a bigger thank you. So thank you so much. I'm filled with gratitude that you came onto the show. Hopefully, who knows, maybe we can get you back on in a year or so and talk some more. But this was fantastic. I love when I have an episode with someone that they studied a topic to its core, its depth, and I just don't know anything about it. And so I learned a lot today, and I learned a lot about myself. So thanks for bringing all that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to throw on that outro music and we'll call it an episode.
All right.